Bishop Riggen tells the story of the time spent and lessons learned at Elder McClain's church. He is reacquainted with familiar apostolic experiences after being away at college for 4 years. Are you ready to face the truth? Face the Truth is the weekly podcast of the Truth Church of Olathe, Kansas. Now here is the guest host for today's podcast.
Welcome to all the Face the Truth podcast listeners and subscribers. We're excited to get into another episode with Pastor Riggen. But before we do, I want to take a brief moment and say a special thank you to Brother Goff. He's been very patient with me in producing the podcast over the past couple of weeks and has offered his hand to help in any way possible. I really appreciate it. This week, Pastor tells the story of how he ended up at Elder McClain's church in Houston, Texas. After being away from home for over 4 years, Pastor recounts the transition back into a local church. He tells about the importance of balancing the Spirit and the Word, the benefits of Christian education, learning to work with people in a local church, and Brother McClain's unique method of counseling. Let us now begin our conversation with Pastor. Pastor, can you tell us about the years immediately following college? What was it like transitioning into full-time ministry?
The Bible college required the students to change churches every quarter. And they had done that because they'd caught a lot of negative feedback from pastors who were sending their kids to Bible college. And many of the kids were ending up at churches like Brother James Kilgore's that ran 1,200. They're huge churches down there in Houston. And many of these kids would leave a small church where they were helping their parents or, helping out in their church, and they'd go off to Bible school. They'd get in these huge churches, and then they'd never come home. And so the college, the district decided we got to do something to keep them from just landing in one of these big churches and staying there. So they developed this program where they required the students to change churches every quarter. And then they built a curriculum around that where you'd have to come in once a week and talk about things you'd learned from that church, how things were different, and that kind of thing. So I tried to find good, solid churches to go to. There were over 50 oneness churches that I knew of in the Houston area. And yet most of those were not good, solid churches. But I had met someone in Bible college that when I started talking to them, it was actually one of my classmates the first year, a young lady there, that there would be things said and she would speak up, and the things that she said sounded so much, she would be talking about what her pastor preached, and it sounded so much like what Elder Davis preached. And I was just blown away. And so I started questioning her, where do you go to church? Well, her home church was a little bit further out, wasn't really considered Houston Metro, but we were allowed to drive there if we wanted to, but it was a good distance out there. And it was Brother Jerry Green in Porter, Texas. Well, I determined at some point I'm going to go to Brother Green's church. And so I did. And I loved it. It was just like home. Brother Green he reminded me so much of Elder Davis. It was just uncanny. The power of God that was there, the move of God that took place, it was just unbelievable. And Brother Green just took a liking to me. And I'm telling you, the man was so kind to me. And so I never forgot Brother Green and just really loved it. So your senior year of college, they let you go back to any 2 churches. You only had to change midterm. So you only had to go to 2 churches that year, and you could go back to any churches that you'd already been to. So Brother Green's was one of them I went to. I was anxious to go back to his church. And I went to Brother Green's, and at that point, of course, I was married. But Brother Green actually came to me one day and asked me, he said, do you have plans after college? And I said, well, I'm praying, I'm thinking about evangelizing, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do. He said, okay. He said, well, I know of somebody that's looking for someone. He said, it's going to involve both you and your wife. He said, but I just wanted to see if you already had plans. And that's all he said. And I said, well, okay, so I had no idea. He was a presbyter. He sat on the district board. I mean, it could have been anything, anywhere. I had no idea. So when school let out, I had nowhere to go. And I had thought about evangelizing, prayed about evangelizing. There were no doors open. And as I've said many times, you've heard me say, the other preachers have heard me say, my pastor taught us, you don't call and ask for a place to preach. So here I am. If I'm going to evangelize, God, you got to have somebody contact me. Well, nobody is. And the crazy thing was, all during my college years, I'd go off and preach places. They had a program that would send us out to churches. And in all of these places where we were, guys would say, oh man, when you get out of college, let me know, because I want to have you come preach for me. And so when college is over and I'd see these guys, I'd say, well, you still in college? No, I finished up. Oh, okay. See you later. And I mean, it's, nothing, there's nothing opening. And we've got to get off the campus. We can only stay on campus for so long. I've got to move somewhere. And so I had a good job. And I told my wife, I said, I don't know what we're going to do, but camp meeting's coming up. And I'm just going to quit my job and trust that God's going to open a door at camp meeting. I don't know what else to do. I didn't have any time off. I didn't have vacation time left.
Did the Lord speak to you, or were you just doing this?
I was just doing it by faith. And that was not wise. All right. Now, when I said Bible school was not good to me in a lot of ways, I did get a lot of positives out of it, but it really did affect me spiritually in a lot of ways. And so it was not a wise decision for me to do. I could have, as you'll hear before the story's over, I could have just taken a day off without pay and been a whole lot better off than what I, but I was desperate. I felt like I've got to have an answer. Brother Davis had tried to set me up with a man who was looking for an assistant, and that was a disaster. That's another story for another day, but it was an absolute disaster. I'm telling you, from the get-go, from the moment we showed up at that man's house, it was a disaster. And that didn't work. I'd had another opportunity to go talk to a man about assisting him, and it was in Oklahoma. And the thing was, especially at that time in Oklahoma, there were a lot of churches that did not believe in the move of the Spirit. They were very conservative, holiness-wise, but they didn't believe in the move of the Spirit. They'd been really burned by what was called the latter rain movement in the 50s and 60s, and they'd become very much against a move of the Spirit because of latter rain was just the first charismatic movement. Same thing, as Brother Epley would say, same old gal, different dress. All right, so Oklahoma especially was really hurt by all the fake stuff that went on with that latter rain. And so they overcorrected. So I'd had an opportunity to go assist a man there, but I noticed there that, they'd look at you funny if you talked in tongues. I mean, they believed in speaking in tongues, but they just didn't want a whole lot of it going on. I mean, it was just, so I knew that wasn't going to work. And that was the only two opportunities I had. And neither one of them were viable. And so I just made this decision that I was going to quit my job and we were going to spend the week at camp meeting and that God was going to give us an answer. We were going to go, we're going to fast, we're going to pray, we're going to get a hold of God, and God's going to give us an answer. So I really thought that what was going to happen was that I'd get to camp meeting and I'd see some of these pastors that had spoken to me about having me come preach, and that I'd set up some revivals and, it would just kick off from there. Well, I did see those pastors, but none of them asked me to come preach. So we literally went the entire week of camp meeting with nothing. Nothing opened until Friday night. And we are in the last service, the last day of camp meeting. And the guy that preached, I don't know, I'm trying to be kind about it, but it just, nothing ever clicked that night. It just, I don't know what happened, but it was one of those nights where I thought if it was me, I'd be walking off of there saying, I really dropped my watermelon tonight. I mean, and this is camp meeting and you got thousands of people there, you know. The other thing was I'm sitting on one side, it's a huge tabernacle, huge auditorium, Texas. And I'm sitting on one side and I look up and I see this friend from college that I haven't seen. He had left college after about the second or third year, and I hadn't seen him since then. So it'd been 2 or 3 years, and he and I were really, really close when he was in college, and I hadn't seen him since he left. And I saw him in the crowd on the other side of the auditorium, and I thought, I'm going to go catch him. I'm going to go catch him. I want to speak to him. And so I knew that the man was coming down to the altar call, and I thought, I'm going to go slip out, and I'm going to go catch my friend. And so the preacher asked everybody to stand, and so I stand. I'm getting ready to make my fast exit. And then the preacher said, I want every minister to come down to the front. And I'm standing there thinking, what do I do? I probably, if I go down the front, I'm going to miss my friend. I won't get a chance to speak to him. But I didn't really come to camp meeting to see my friend. I better just go down to the front. So I went down to the front. And then he said, I want all of you to turn around and face the congregation. And I don't remember if he was having the congregation pray for all the preachers. I don't remember what was happening. But I just remember I was standing there and we were facing the congregation. And all of a sudden I felt this hand on my back. I don't know how to describe it to you, except it felt like a burning sensation. That I knew something was going on. This was more than just somebody standing behind me praying for me. I knew there was something deeper happening here. And when everyone stopped praying, the hand remained. And I just stood there and I'm thinking, okay. And I waited and the hand stayed there. And finally, I turned around, and it was Elder McClain. And I mean, I was just blown away because I didn't know that he even knew who I was, knew anything about me. I had attended, his was one of the churches I had attended during my rotational program at Bible school, but I never, that particular quarter, I had been gone almost every weekend. I didn't really even get to hardly be at his church. So, you know, it's not like he really even got to see me, know me. And I thought, this is really strange that he's standing here like this. And then he just looks at me. And I'm telling you, he had these piercing eyes that they were the darkest brown. It was almost like his pupils, almost like everything was black. And he could fasten them on you and just lock in. And you felt like he was looking all the way down into your soul. And he fastened those eyes on me and just looked at me. And I'm just looking at him. And he said, I want to talk to you. And I said, yes, sir. He said, I'd like for you to come out to my place tomorrow. He said, we've got a little trailer outside of town. He said, I'd like for you and your wife to come out there and meet with us 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. He said, here's the directions. I want to talk to you. He said, I'm needing some help. And I was blown away. I mean, so here we were, the last day, the last service, the last minute. And a door opened. Of course, the next morning, before I went, I called Elder Davis. Now, Elder Davis was known. I mean, he stayed up late. That's just the way he did things. He was always up late. He prayed through the night. Then he'd sleep late. He didn't mind telling you he's sleeping late. But I needed to talk to him before I made a decision with Brother McClain. And I hated to have to call him in the morning and wake him up, but I knew that I was going to have to. So I did. I called him. I woke him up, and I told him, I'm sorry. Brother Davis, but you know that I've been trying to find direction, trying to find a place. And I said, Brother McClain talked to me last night, wants me to come out to his place to talk to him about going to work with him. And I just needed to talk to you about it. He said, anything that Brother McClain wants you to do, I'm for it. And I said, okay, that's all I needed to hear. So that's what we did. And we went on out to his place, and he talked to us and, told us what our responsibilities would be. And I told him, that we would have to be off campus pretty soon. We were going to have to leave campus before he really needed us on site. I think we had to be out like July 1st or something. And he didn't need anybody. School didn't start until the end of August. But he said, well, that's fine. You can come on over. But we never discussed money. I did not know until I got my first paycheck how much he was paying me. To me, it didn't matter. To me, the fact that I was going to get to work with Elder Wayne McClain, who was a hero to me. I'd watched him. He'd been the district youth president for a number of years. So I'd seen him operate in the pulpit at camps and what have you. Knew him to be a very spiritual man and knew the respect that Elder Davis had for him. So I was, I didn't care. I didn't care what he was paying me, just the idea that I got to work with him. To the question now about the things that I learned. One of the things that I said earlier was that Bible school was not good to me in a lot of ways. There were positives that I gleaned, but there were a lot of negatives that I picked up. And I don't know that I'm being fair to put all the blame on Bible college. I know there's probably a lot of people listening, and I don't want to give the idea that I'm saying every Bible college is bad. What I am saying is this, that at the time that I went, the dynamic of the college was not good at all. During my 4 years that I was there, we had 3 different presidents in 4 years. At the end of my sophomore year, the day after graduation for the college, the very next day, 2 of the instructors, full-time instructors, announced that they were giving up their license with the organization and going charismatic. And so, they didn't make that decision overnight, and they didn't change their beliefs overnight. So they'd been teaching things for a long time that were contrary to what the Scripture said. And so that's why I need to clarify that I'm not condemning Bible school per se. I'm saying at that time, things were not good. There was a dynamic there during the 4 years that I was there that put some things in us that were contrary to everything I had known and been taught growing up. And I really left college with some arrogance in me. Now, it never got a hold of me as much as some. There was one guy in our class that would carry a concordance with him. He'd hear a preacher preach, and he'd get it out and he'd look up a word, and if the guy wasn't using the word properly, he'd walk out of there shaking his head. But for most of us coming out of those 4 years that had gone through what we went through, most of us walked away. I guess arrogance is not the right word for all of us, but very skeptical. We did hear things like, if your pastor doesn't agree with this, well, you have to understand he probably didn't go to college. He probably didn't get the education that you've got. I mean, we did hear things like that. And again, I'm not saying that's what colleges are teaching today, Bible colleges, but I'm saying that's what happened during my 4 years. I was there at a bad time. And the other thing is, for 4 years, it was word, 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 word. Nothing about the Spirit. Now, the first year that I was there, Brother Robert Davis, Sr., was there. I was a freshman. He was a senior. He became a mentor to me during that first year, and he kind of became an anchor, something that kept me solid. And at times when I would just be, in a complete uproar, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, I could go to him and just sit down in his dorm room, and the two of us could just talk. He was Bobby, I was Greg. That was the way it was. And we would just sit down, and I could just open my heart and talk to him, and he could give me the stability that I needed to kind of keep me anchored and keep me in the right direction. But then he graduated that first year. So then I go through 3 years, and it actually started getting worse those next 3 years than it was that first year. And so things were not good for me spiritually. There wasn't a strong emphasis on prayer. In fact, there was no emphasis on prayer. I don't remember ever hearing a teacher tell us, you guys really need to get a relationship with God. It was just all about the Word. It was just all about, looking into this and that and whatever. And I walked out of college really just with a lot of things messed up in my mind. And so with Elder McClain, it really, I've said to many people, it was my salvation that I could end up there at a crucial moment in my ministry. Because one of the things that he did is just by example, he got me back into that habit of prayer. I remember one day sitting in his living room, and he said, I've been asked to go teach at the Bible school tomorrow. He said, I got to teach the seniors. He said, I'm thinking about teaching on prayer. He said, I'm telling you, he said, those guys couldn't pray their way out of a wet paper bag. And I got mad. But the reason I got mad is because I knew, number one, he was really talking about me. Because I had just left there. I wasn't that far removed from being one of those seniors. And number two, because I knew he was telling the truth. And it got a hold of me. And something started stirring in me of what my foundation was. And for me to go back to Apostolic Temple, which was, my home church was Apostolic Tabernacle. Elder McClain's was Apostolic Temple. To go to Apostolic Temple and to see the operation of the Spirit and to watch Elder McClain walk in the Spirit the way my pastor had. And it just started stirring all of that in me, and it drove me back to a prayer room and allowed me again to start learning to operate in the Spirit again. And so, that was some of the things that meant the most to me during that time with Elder McClain. It was reestablishing the importance of prayer, and second, really allowing myself, because up until that time, there were instances where God had used me, but up until I went to Elder McClain's, I don't know that there was a real consistent pattern of being used in the Spirit. It was something that I watched in him and learned a lot from him and from his example and seeing him. He was an amazing man in that there were times, it might be offering time, and he could just step to the pulpit and get ready to say something. And all of a sudden, he's prophesying. And God just used him. And he didn't miss. He was right. And I just watching him and learning from him. And then he had a unique way of counseling, and that taught me a lot too. His way of counseling was bring the couple in and stare at them. And really, that's what he did. He'd have, I don't know how many times I sat in that office and watched, and he'd get them in there and he'd let them talk. And then he would just look at them. He wouldn't say a word. And those piercing eyes lock in on him, and he wouldn't say one word. And they'd start growing uncomfortable, and they'd talk some more. And he'd just sit and stare. And he would do that until he finally felt like, now we're getting to the bottom of things. because people will be superficial in what they're telling you. But he knew if he would just sit and look at them long enough and wait them out, they would eventually spill their guts. And he was right. And so there was so much. And the other thing was our main responsibility was working in the school. And that taught us so much about working with people. Because when you're dealing with somebody's kids, and really I think those 2 years, well, I have no doubt those 2 years of working in that school did more to prepare me for pastoring than 4 years of Bible school did. Because I was having constant interaction with those people, having to deal with them, deal with their kids. And dealing with kids teaches you a lot about people too. That experience. And even working in the school, another thing that I learned there was the importance of a Christian-based education. And I'd never thought about all the negative things that are being foisted on kids in the public schools. And it really put a deep love for Christian education in my heart because of the 2 years that we spent working with him and in his Christian school.
Thank you again, Bishop, for your openness in this conversation. It has been particularly eye-opening for me and hopefully for others as well. My heart was smitten when Pastor talked about the attitude that students developed while they were away at college. It's apparent that while visiting Elder McClain, and even during the school years when he visited Brother Jerry Green, Pastor's reacquaintance with that familiar apostolic experience was especially important to him. I believe that God gave to Pastor an important key. Because Pastor was duly noting the examples of Elder Davis and Elder McClain, it's evident that God has allowed him to emulate those examples for us. This is one of the reasons why the Truth Church is the kind of church that makes that apostolic experience one that is familiar as well. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you owe it to yourself to make your way to the Truth Church of Olathe, Kansas, and have this experience for yourself. Next week, we'll continue our conversation with Bishop Riggen as he details his first pastoral experiences.
Thank you to everyone who has joined us for today's podcast. We want you to know that we are here to help you in any way we can. If there is anything we can do for you, please don't hesitate to contact us. Send your prayer requests to prayer@olathetruth.com. That's prayer@olathetruth.com. If you live in the Kansas City metropolitan area, we invite you to join us for our services this week. Sunday morning at 10, Sunday evening at 6, and Tuesday evening at 7:30. For those who cannot attend, we will provide a live stream on our Facebook page, our YouTube page, and our website, olathetruth.com/live. Until our next podcast, take care and God bless.